Prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in these council chambers. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I ask that you remain standing for just a minute. Last week we lost one of the last real American heroes, I think, when John Glenn passed away. So for all of his courage and wisdom, and he was not only a patriot, he was a senator, an astronaut, and so just if we could take a minute to remember him and all of his accomplishments to us. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mrs. Stickley.
Here.
Mr. Blair.
Here.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Here.
Mr. Sanker.
Here.
Mr. Mumper.
Here.
All members are here. We have one request to amend the agenda, and that is to attach a communication from Tax Commissioner Chuck Barlow regarding the November earnings tax. I would suggest that we place that on the agenda as communication number 4 and move the letter from Keith Moore requesting executive session down to number 5. Mr. Bonsall,
Yeah, I move that we amend the agenda as stated.
seconded by Mrs. Hanrahan. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We have the minutes from the November 22nd, 2016 meeting, which were distributed by email earlier. Mr. Clark,
Move to approve the minutes as of read.
seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We do have requests to address council, but not on agenda items, so we will take those under advisement a little later. Next is reports of standing committees, and the first is Finance, Budget, and Audit Committee. Mr. Sanker?
Thank you, Madam President. This committee report, the Finance, Budget, and Audit dated 12/6/16 to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio. We, your Committee of Finance, Budget, and Audit, to whom was referred the 2016 appropriations and city finances and claims, beg leave to submit the following report. Number 1, we reviewed and suggested final appropriation changes for the 2016 for possible approval at the December 13th meeting. 2, we reviewed a draft for a temporary 2017 appropriations. 3, we reviewed a draft of our potential recovery plan. We can use additional suggestions to add to this plan. And 4, we reviewed the claim of Frank Mercurio. We recommended that the claim be sent to the Law Department for review. Respectfully submitted, Joe Sanker, John Mumper, and Tammy Stickley.
Mr. Mumper?
I move the claim be accepted, or the report be accepted.
Seconded by Mr. Blair.
Stuck on the claim.
Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan. Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is the committee report from Economic and Community Development. Mr. Bonsall?
Yep. Thank you, Madam President. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Economic and Community Development, met on the following topics. MSD claims for sewer backups and the state of Norwood sewers. And we beg leave to submit the following report. 1, MSD gave us new direction for residents to submit all of their damages on one claim. 2, residents are starting to get checks for damages. thankfully. 3, the 828 backups were caused due to very heavy rainfall, overwhelming local sewers at specific locations. And 4, MSD's original 1968 operating agreement comes up in 2018, and negotiations are currently ongoing for what the future of MSD will look like. Respectfully submitted, James Bonsall, Marilyn Hanrahan, Joe Senker.
Thank you. Mr. Clark,
Move to accept the committee report.
seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. So Andrew Clark, who is also on the committee, was not able to be there, but I mean, he was definitely involved in this. He sent me questions ahead of time and definitely followed up afterwards. So just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any other discussion? The motion on the floor is to receive and file the report. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We have no second and third reading of ordinances. We move on to introductory readings of ordinances. The first is an ordinance adopting a modified plan of operation and governance for the natural gas governmental aggregation and declaring an emergency. By way of comment, if you don't know what this is, we currently have contracts with Energy Alliances, and the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio instituted this new or updated plan of operation and governance. It requires 2 years instead of 1 year. However, the folks at Energy Alliances reminded me in discussions that the folks in Norwood are able to opt out of gas or opt out of gas aggregation at any time for any reason. And so the reason for this ordinance is the new regulations that were handed down by the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, if that makes your job easier. Mr. Bonsall?
Yep. I move that we have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan. Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Please have all 3 readings.
Ordinance adopting a modified plan of operation and governance for natural gas governmental aggregation and declaring an emergency. Ordinance adopting a modified plan of operation and governance for natural gas governmental aggregation and declaring an emergency. Ordinance adopting a modified plan of operation and governance for natural gas governmental aggregation and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, I move that the ordinance be passed.
Seconded by Mrs. Stickley. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We'll move on to an ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2016 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Sanker?
Madam President, I would recommend we have all 3 readings of the proposed ordinance.
Seconded by Mr. Mumper. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sanker?
Yes, before we get into it, the Exhibit A that we went through at the finance meeting and that we were using as a basis for the final appropriation, there are a couple changes to that that are on the Exhibit A that's on your desk this evening. And briefly, to give a sketch of what the changes are and why they were made is that after our finance meeting, actually had a meeting with the state auditors, and they had made some suggestions in order for our appropriations to come closer to balancing with our certificate that we submitted with the county. And so a couple of things that they suggested were, well, one, the outside legal fees, is different than what we had proposed, it just because there was another bill that came in regards to the fact-finding. But under increase, the garbage fund, we didn't have enough appropriation, but we haven't had enough cash, so we had to increase the the revenue in the garbage fund, so that there's a reason for that. Not decreasing anything, it just had to match the appropriation that was put forth early on, so the revenue has to balance. Under police crime control and also fire department personnel, that number there of $398,000 and also $275,000, that reflects the police and fire pension payments that we are committed to paying next year by our contractual agreement with the pension board. And so, being we weren't going to be able to pay that this year, it was going to roll into next year, but they suggested reducing that now because it's going to be put back in next year for payment, because we do have contract with them to pay, and to pay it next year anyway. We couldn't pay it this year, so that's the reason that's changed to make that balance and then move it into next year. The last item is on the C9 trust. You can see that was reduced, and the suggestion was the obligation that we have to that is going to be rolled into next year. So if we have an open PO this year that we're not going to be able to pay, it's just going to affect the appropriation for this year, and it'll affect how the appropriations are set forth for next year. So the PO was suggested that it would be closed for this year and reopen next year, because the obligation's there. We owe the money, but it's not something we're going to be able to pay in this calendar year. So it would be rolled in to next year, and it would just basically clean it up and closing that PO, because there isn't the cash to pay it. So didn't know if anybody really noticed that, but just to give you an explanation of what those were, the only changes that were made compared to the Exhibit A that we looked at and compared with at the finance meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. Is there any other discussion? The motion on the floor then is to suspend the rules. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Please have all three readings.
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2016 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2016 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2016 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mumper.
I move the ordinance be passed.
Seconded by Mrs. Stickley. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is an ordinance making temporary appropriations for the expenditures of the City of Norwood, Ohio for the calendar year ending on December 31st, 2017. Mr. Sanker.
Madam President, I would recommend on this that we only have the first reading.
Seconded by Mrs. Hannerhan. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Please have the first reading.
Ordinance making temporary appropriations for the expenditures of the City of Norwood, Ohio for the calendar year ending on December 31, 2017.
We have no introductory readings of resolutions, administration reports, so we'll move on to other requests to address council. And the first is Jerry Clems regarding Coat Drive and community partnerships. Welcome back to council, Mr. Clems. It's been a few years.
Seems like yes.
If you'll give us your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes to address council.
Okay, my name's Gary Clems. I live at 5440
Fenwick, Apartment 3, 45214. My purpose of being here tonight is to make you aware of a couple of things. First of all, last year, because of support from the state Knights of Columbus, we had a clothing distribution at Sharpsburg School where we gave away about 100 coats to kids who didn't have coats. I've been working on this project for this year, and last night everything kind of fell together. First of all, the Norwood Knights of Columbus was chartered in 1906, November 6th, so we're 110 years old. And in cooperation with Holy Trinity Church, Father Kellerman, and the St. Vincent de Paul Society, we're going to have an event January 14th. I just got an okay last night. We're going to have it at the Xavier Sintos Center because the demand is great and Sharpsburg is not big enough. And I met with Rob Amodio and last year Reverend James came on board and found out of what we were doing and brought a lot of kids. The thing it brings me here tonight is that the demand at St. Vincent de Paul for coats is real strong, and they're not sure how many coats they'll have for our January 14th event. Rob Amodio's meeting with the chamber to get the businesses behind it. We need to use open doors to help with collecting coats. There are, with the paperwork I give you, you see who you need to call if a business wants a collection barrel, and who they call to get it picked up. So there's plenty of need. I've already had 2 boxes of coats donated. There are 12 to a box. You'll see that and I'm going to be working to get donations to buy coats so that we have enough to meet the need. It's the reason it's in January is that's gives St. Vincent de Paul time to collect a quantity of coats so we can meet the need. The event will be at the Sintos Center from 9 to noon. The coats are free. I can tell you from our experience last year that where we gave out 100 coats, that the need is strong, and any doors you can open, any churches or any people that can help with collecting coats. I know that Donna's sister showed up at church Sunday with an armload of coats, you know.
I haven't touched Bob's closet yet, so hold
Please?
on. I haven't touched Bob's closet yet, so hold on.
So, yeah. So anyway, but I'd like to defer now to Reverend James to let him say his part. Last year he was shuttled young people in to get coats who otherwise would have had to walk. So we need ways to these people that don't have coats. A lot of them don't have cars either. So we need ideas on how we can shuttle people in to pick up a coat. Last year we had a group show up that was invited by this school, they were called the Bearded Assassins. They were all young guys with beards and black shirts, and they were the gentlest, neatest people to help kids find their coats. One of them had a little boy came with a coat that the zipper was broke. He found a new coat and he told the helper that here you can take and repair this and give this to somebody else. So it's a worthwhile charity and something that I've been working on this year for a couple months, but it all just kind of started falling together, and we need your help. Any ideas? On the second page of your stuff is all the different contacts. Call me, call Reverend James, whoever, but this is can be a big event, and it can be a very helpful event for the community.
So, Mr. Clems, if people have coats to donate, can you tell us where should they take them, or should they call?
Well, they can do, if
Or money to donate for coats?
Holy Trinity has also the Joseph B.W. has a tub, Zip Printing has a tub, and there's also one at St. Nicholas Academy. There's tubs there, and if you got coats and aren't able to drop them off, call me. We'll get somebody to pick them up. Is there any other questions?
Yeah. Is
Mr.
this,
Bonso?
thank you very much, Madam President. Is this directed at, I guess, all ages? Is it directed at kids?
Well, most of last year was because of availability, we directed mostly at kids.
Okay.
One of the things we did do, if there were people who showed up that didn't have a coat, that were older and that we didn't have a coat for, we had them fill out a form, and through money that I had received from a parishioner, we went to Burlington and bought them all coats. And Reverend James presented them to them. So we want this to work any way we can, and this is a good way to clean out your cupboard, and clean out Bob Lake's cupboard.
Right. Just don't tell him. He won't know they're gone until I've already taken them.
All right, well, excuse me for that, Mrs. Lake. But my wife keeps looking at my coats, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clems. And we also have Pastor Sonny James.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I'm Pastor Sonny James, 1830 Hopkins Avenue here in Norwood, Ohio. Let me just first extend a very sincere and genuine, heartfelt happy holidays, greetings to our council members and to all of our city workers, employees, and neighbors. I'm very, very honored and pleased to partner with Mr. Norwood, as we know him to be, Jerry Clems. Many of you have seen me in different vernaculars, and I have to say that I'm honored to have a mentor like Mr. Clems, because he will certainly keep you on the straight and narrow, or on the narrow, as it's been referred. I'm very honored. I'm also honored to see him open and be inclusive, and that's one of the things that I really push on, and to partner with a new organization in Norwood, Elevations, who's headed by Kirsten James, to really help in the push of the transportation, because last year, as Mr. Clems could see, I mean, we had to just load these folks up in our vehicles and rush them back and forth, back and forth. So we will be partnering with Elevations to help to facilitate that a lot easier. And then also through the Norwood Service League with Lupe Hoyt, which many of us know, the Norwood Service League has been in existence for about 100 years as well, and making a big push to partner with organizations that need a 501c3 like Elevations and other very worthwhile programs, feeding families, educating them in the whole 9 yards. I don't want to be long tonight. I just want to wish you all a very happy holiday. I do want to encourage you to get involved with the coat drive. I can't speak on behalf of the YMCA, but because we do have a great partnership, we'll be going after them to put a barrel there also, because that's a neutral, centrally located place, so families can easily get to that as well. And you all have my email, Pastor Sonny James, that's SONNY, JAMES @gmail.com, and my phone number is 513-487-8843. If anybody has any input, suggestion, ideas, what I love about Mr. Clems is he's actually walking out what we need to be doing, and that's being inclusive and open to everyone's ideas and help, whatever it is. Also, I wanted to be encouraged that I'm sure our police department, I did not get a chance to talk to the chief because, like Jerry said, things are just kind of coming together and nothing was actually made public, so I haven't made an official, formal plea to the chief, but our police department has been very open and cordial in working in community matters. Also, I left a message for Joe at the fire department. I'm very excited because I know those two departments will get behind this and rally it. I did talk to Rob Amodio today, and he did say that the schools are going to be on board in helping us with what we can do. So God bless all of you. In closing, I just want to say next, on the 30th, we had been talking about boxing events coming in town, and for whatever reason, we haven't been able to bring one to Norwood. So there is a boxing event down in Evendale at the Sportsplex there. You will be able to see some of top world-class fighters being brought in, and you'll see just how they pack the arenas. And again, my son Boom Boom, he's setting everything up, so he couldn't be here tonight, but he is the one that's going to be helping to catalyst this event for Norwood if we can bring it in partnership with our city and some of our city buildings. Just want you guys to keep open, because anything that I do, I want you to know that I'm not about bringing in any money that doesn't help the town that I live in. So if any of you want to come to that event, give me a call. You're more than welcome to come, and you can see the events firsthand. You can see how people will be flying in from all over the country to participate in this event. It'll be streamed, televised. And my prayer is that we will be able to bring these world-class events to our fine city of Norwood so that we can then just freely, for no obligation other than to be a blessing and help our economic situation, to share in that with our city. So God bless you guys. Happy holidays. And if you hear a knock on your door come Christmas dinner, just know it's Reverend James trying to get a piece of chicken. God bless you guys, okay?
Thank you,
God
Pastor
bless you.
James.
Peace.
Thank you. We'll move on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? None? Any new business? Mr. Blair?
So I was just thinking, me and Marilyn have been talking, and I've talked with police chief a little bit about it, along with Ron Wallace, our fire chief. And one of the things that I was thinking about that I think would be very beneficial for us as council and for our citizens is if once a month we ended up meeting with all the department heads, all of council, all of administration here, have a meeting, have everybody on the same page every single month, open communication with what are the needs, what's going on, what can we do, what can't we do, and our reasons why and why not. So that way, air is fresh, there's no need for debate or social media. It can all just be out there in real life for people to understand. I think it'd be a fantastic idea.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Maybe this can be scheduled at the same time, who knows? But anyway, so over the last, I guess, month and a half or so, Councilmember Hanrahan had made a request that we get information from the police department regarding, I guess, the current status of our emergency dispatch center and costs that are currently being incurred, future costs, and future regulations. And unfortunately, just due to, I guess, administrative red tape, we have not been able to get that information. But I do think that information will eventually find its way to our chamber here. However, so, in anticipation of that, I'd like the council to schedule a committee of the whole meeting for the 3rd or 4th week of January so that we can, for the police chief and/or his designee to present to us on the emergency dispatch center and on the requests that were originally made.
I will meet with the chief and see what date might be mutually agreeable for us, if that's okay with him, and we'll set something up. We'll get back to you and let you know.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Bonso. Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have a question to what Mr. Blair just said. Is this something we would put a resolution together to do, or just set up a meeting to start having meetings with everybody? How would we go about doing this as a
You
council?
could, if you wanted to, you could have monthly committee of the whole meetings and just have them open discussion with department heads if you choose to do it that way. If you wanted to set up a certain date, third Tuesday of the month, something like that, or we could just have monthly committee of the whole meetings with an agenda of just listening. Or you could do it during the day when department heads are here. I don't know how many people would be available.
Sorry.
No, please take it.
So would they also be able to be structured meetings as well instead of just open discussion? Like, hey, we want to know what things do you need specifically? When do they expire? When do you need them? How much? What exactly? What hasn't been taken care of? What has been? Along with, so what is going on? If there's people in their departments, whether it's employees or whatever, that aren't doing their jobs correctly, maybe, or that there's a misinformation or just a drop the ball on communication, so that way we can all stay well communicated with one another. That's kind of what I'm looking for in these meetings. Not just it be an open free-for-all, but, get down to brass tacks. What's the point? What's needed? What's not needed? Where do we go from here?
Mr. Stanker, some of that sounds like finance committee matters. Do you have an opinion on that as to?
No, ma'am.
Or do you just want all the help you can get at this point?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
If you want to place something in committee of the whole and we can try it for a couple of months and see how it works, we could certainly do that.
Okay.
And we'll start off with the first one in January with the chief. How is that? And we'll invite other department heads and we'll see if they have anything that they want to say.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll see how it goes. Thank you. Mr. Bonso.
Thank you, Madam President. So I just want to wish all Norwood residents, our council, city employees, and the like, just a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays as they celebrate other holidays. It's been a pleasure so far this year to be on this council and to be able to represent the citizens. And I'm, like I said, just very proud of the city and just hope that everybody's able to enjoy their holidays. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonso. Mr. Clark.
I'd just like to give a quick thank you to the Norwood Business and Professional Women's Club for Christmastown. Those who attended, I know, had a wonderful time. My family had a great time, and it was very well attended. The weather was very nice. So I'm really thankful for that event. It's a lot of fun and puts you in the kind of holiday Christmas spirit. So just want to give them a thank you and a job well done.
Cold but no snow. Thank you.
Yeah.
That one year, there was like, oh my God, there was so much snow. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there any other new business? Okay, and we'll move on to communications. The first is a letter from Chuck Barlow regarding monthly earnings tax report for October 2016.
To Norwood City Council, attaches a monthly report for October 2016 indicating collections in the amount of $1,363,857.15. This reflects an average year-to-date increase of 3.95% from 2015. Should you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Chuck Barlow, Tax Commissioner.
Mr. Mumford,
Move the letter be received and filed.
seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan. Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter from Andrew Conlon regarding Mayor's Court fines for November 2016.
Here, Mayor Williams, here are the ticket totals heard in Mayor's Court for the month of November 2016. Traffic 19, misdemeanor 29, Parkers 3, stays 2. Respectfully, Andrew Conlon, Clerk of Courts, Norwood, Ohio.
Mr. Clark,
Move that the letter be received and filed.
seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter from Duke Energy regarding Duke Energy's intent to file for an adjustment to rider AMRP rates.
To whom it may concern, this letter is to inform you that Duke Energy Ohio, Inc., Duke Energy Ohio, will file an application for an increase in rates with the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, Commission, on or before February 28, 2017. The application will propose a decrease in rates of approximately $450,000 for rider AMRP, Accelerated Main Replacement Program rider for Duke Energy Ohio's gas distribution service, to be effective in May 2017. This decrease will result in a decrease of 5 cents per month for residential customers and represents a decrease in Duke Energy Ohio's gas rates of approximately 0.1% of currently existing rates based on a previously negotiated cap for this rate agreed to by the interested parties in a stipulation and recommendation and approved by the Commission in an opinion and order dated November 13, 2013, in the matter of the application of Duke Energy Ohio, Inc. for an increase in rates, case number 12-1685-GA-AIR. Under its Accelerated Main Replacement Program, Duke Energy Ohio has installed plastic mains and service lines to replace the cast iron and bare steel mains and metallic service lines throughout its service territory over an accelerated time period. When Duke Energy Ohio embarked on this program in 2001, it had approximately 1,000 miles of cast iron mains and 192 miles of bare steel mains. These mains were aged, some dating back to circa 1873, and were much less reliable than plastic pipe. This program has significantly reduced Duke Energy Ohio's operation and maintenance expenses and has enabled Duke Energy Ohio to operate its distribution system at higher pressures, which provides benefits such as reduced water infiltration into the gas mains. Duke Energy Ohio currently has no cast iron and bare steel mains remaining in its distribution system. In an opinion and order dated November 13, 2013, in the matter of the application of Duke Energy Ohio, Inc. for an increase in rates, case number 12-1685-GA-AIR, the Commission issued an opinion and order allowing for Duke Energy Ohio to file an annual rate changes to cover the cost of this program, including camera work expenses. I have enclosed a list of the proposed new rates. These rates are subject to change after the Commission holds public evidentiary hearings. Although this letter is a formal notice to you, in accordance with Ohio Public Utility Law, we also have representatives available to discuss our rate proposal. If you have any questions about our rate proposal, please call our Rates Department at 513-287-2341, and we will respond to your inquiries. If you have other questions regarding our service, please call your Duke Energy Ohio Customer Service Manager. As always, we value your role as our customers and as the elected representatives of the communities we serve. Very truly yours, James P. Henning, State President, Ohio and Kentucky, Duke Energy Ohio, Inc.
Mr. Blair.
I propose we receive and file the letter.
Seconded by Mr. Mumper. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sanker.
I guess reading it over and over the last couple of days, they're asking for an increase, but then a slight decrease in a previous requested increase for their replacement of their cast iron mains. The only thing it doesn't say in there is what the proposed increase is being requested. It says what the decrease was going to be.
Right.
You know, and they're happy to tell you, 0.1%. But there's nothing in there saying what their proposed increase, what they're looking for.
Right.
So, I mean, we don't have any real, but just, receive and file it unless we, I don't know when they really didn't have a date, it's a date set when they're going to formally propose this.
They'll file the application on or before February 28th, 2017, so.
I guess they're just letting us know that they're going to request an increase your rates.
Maybe offset that nickel we're going to say there. Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I think there's just some typos in this thing because the date of it on the top of it's November 22nd, 2015. I mean, I think this was just a copy of another letter that they were just kind of changed things, but they forgot to change that one word, increase, to decrease. Because on the back it has like all of their rates,
Right.
and all of them, just very slight, just very, very slightly go down. Nothing that anybody will notice. So I guess it's good that the rates are going down. That's a good thing. So.
I will be happy to call tomorrow, and I'll let you know what they tell us, what they tell me. You may be right, Mr. Bonsall. The motion is there any other discussion? The motion on the floor is to receive and file the letter. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter from Chuck Barlow regarding earnings tax report for November 2016.
To Norwood City Council, attaches a monthly report for November 2016 indicating collections in the amount of $986,735.76. This reflects an average year-to-date increase of 2.56% over 2015. Should you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Chuck Barlow, Tax Commissioner.
Mr. Clark.
Move that the letter be received and filed.
Seconded by Mr. Mumper. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Next is a letter from Keith Moore regarding a request for executive session to discuss pending imminent litigation.
Dear TA, I would like to ask council to enter executive session to discuss pending and imminent litigation at the next council meeting, December 13th, 2016. Please place this request at the end of the agenda. Thank you, Keith Moore, Norwood Law Director.
Mr. Mumper.
I'd like to receive and file a letter and approve the request to go into executive session for pending and imminent litigation.
Seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We will move into executive session now, so we ask all those on the audience to please move outside and close the door. We will come back into session at the end of the executive session, but only for the purpose of adjourning. We will not have any other discussion following the executive session. And please turn off the microphones and the cameras.
Don, we've got Kurt Irie.
All right, we are back in session. The chair would like to note that Mr. Blair had to leave during the executive session. So we have no absent members to excuse.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded by Mrs. Hanrahan. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Stickley.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumber.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned.